With Star Citizen 3.14 going live recently, there's a lot of excitement in Star Citizen at the moment. But as always, another month has passed, and there's plenty of information for us to digest regarding the progress of Star Citizen development. I am Space Tomato, and I'm here to get you caught up. Thank you for coming to my Tomato Talk. And thanks to my newest Patreon supporters Duke Vega, Commander Azimaza, and Bartleby. The July report started with more motion capture work, focusing on the first polish passes of the vendor AI with the data received from what could have been the insightful work we saw in last month's report.
I'm not even supposed to be here today.
The doctor and nurse were also polished on the behavior front, allowing them to react to patients. The AI features team worked on combat behaviors, making sure reactions and perceptions were correct, and cover selection worked as intended. This is part of a full review of combat behaviors that we've seen worked on over the course of the last several monthly reports. The ability to spread out around a foe and taunt them during melee combat scenarios was also worked on. Fight Club time. The AI tech team put a lot of time into the planetary navigation system that will allow NPCs and animals to move around planets on their own schedule. Work was also submitted to allow NPCs to push trolleys in a believable way for a multitude of loads on various inclines and declines. This will allow NPCs to help load cargo and retrieve items for players in different situations, particularly the persistent hangars that we know is coming next year in combination with the localized and physicalized inventories that we're getting in the next patch. A small improvement to group quantum travel was also made, allowing NPCs to control and execute group quantum jumps even if a player is in the group. This could be useful for things like escort missions over longer periods of arcing narrative. While animation worked on usables that can be interacted with around the game, they also worked on something quite interesting. Steps are beginning to be made to co-opt existing animations for new areas, such as the rail lean being applied to a bar counter. They are also working on the ability to better simulate human behavior on a larger scale, covering AI layouts in certain areas. So far, these areas include prisons, medical locations, shantytowns, Kasaba stores, and the G-Lock bar in Area 18. In character art, the team has begun designing Cybernetics, which will be used as the health system progresses further for those who let their body break down beyond repair. The environment art team continued polishing Pyro's planets and moons as the second system continues its final stretch towards implementation into the game. Notice how they stopped showing us anything that has to do with this system. Expect to see it once or twice in Inside Star Citizen this quarter, but then in all its glory at CitizenCon. In Montreal, the team continued with the Grimhex and Rest Stop medical facilities. The larger Lorville and Area 18 hospitals, which have sat dormant for years, are receiving a lot of work as well to be more in line with the new Babbage Hospital. On the design side, a lot of work was put into making these locations believable with AI. Clearly, the hospital feature, which will arrive with the new medical gameplay in the next update, is a massive deal and will bring quite a few small and large changes to the game. The team also iterated on the creation and placement of the new gamified derelict ship locations. What I'm willing to consider derelict ships Tier 1, as the version we've been using has been Tier 0, these will represent one of the first minor points of interests, much like caves, and will be procedurally generated but hand-assisted puzzles, with platforming, hostile AI, and loot involved both on planets and in space. A very nice small addition that can do a lot to add some downtime activity and more interesting areas to explore for players, likely next year. A lot happened in ship art last month. To start off, the Crusader Ares ships have both entered final art and prep for the next update. The Drake Vulture is continuing through early creation phases in the white box, which is fantastic, and an all-new vehicle has begun work. It's not necessarily unannounced, but we have no clue as to what it is yet. The upcoming variant mentioned last month, the Tomato Pin, has moved past the first stage of creation to the gray box phase. It's not actually called the Tomato Pin. Last month's yet-to-be-announced ship is receiving its finishing touches before heading to tech art and other downstream teams like lighting and audio to complete it. This is most likely the recently teased Origin 400i and likely points towards its coming to the next update, as work still needs to be complete. The Redeemer is also finishing up in final art scheduled for the next update as well. Yet another new unannounced ship, which apparently the team is especially excited for, has also moved to the gray box stage. While the gold standard Saber cockpit and lighting were wrapped up, the Retaliator also continued through the gold standard process as well, getting quite a few small changes from corrected geometry to new ship item compartments. A new fuel arm is being worked on the Starfarer for the new ship-to-ship refueling game loop scheduled for next year. And of course, one more unannounced ship is deep in the gray box phase, and it's a big one. With some issues with its exterior mechanisms now resolved, it's moving through the pipeline well. There are a number of artists working together on this one, and each area of the ship's interior is coming along nicely. Let's just take a moment to understand what's going on here with all these unannounced ships. Before, you may have heard Star Citizen had the reputation of constantly selling JPEGs. Concept sales have been dying down recently. While there are still some concept reveals, ships are definitely starting to be finished more and more before being revealed. Expect to keep seeing new ships created in line with the upcoming gameplay that they represent, such as medical, repair, salvage, exploration, and refueling, while seeing less and less concept sales. The weapons art team worked on the Crusader Ares weapons and the A2 bomb. Notice that work on the salvage tool and tractor beam, which were previously being worked on, is nowhere to be seen. The audio team worked on the Grimhex Medical Center, ensuring the rundown vibe with music and effects. They are also covering the A2 bomber. The tech sound design team made improvements to dogfighting and ship weapons. Weapons in Star Citizen have always felt quite flat to me, despite the talent I know CIG has. I really hope this is going to help out in that department. Sounds are meant to sound more intense now and be noticeable from further away. This will be great for the larger and larger battles that we're experiencing in the game as of late. Work on Orison continued, with Star Citizen composer Pedro Camacho finishing up the tracks and working on the final song for the spaceport. The engine team did some compression of render meshes and conversion of vertex positions to a new language, both of which allow for savings in memory and CPU respectively. The Gen 12 renderer, while continuing to be implemented, also saw support for referencing refraction during rendering, tessellation support in the G-buffer pass, and a ported Z pre-pass, and now runs with async shader compilation enabled by default. So, yeah. Volumetric clouds saw improvements, and cloud shaping was changed to help avoid the occasional tiled look that one might see from orbit. A new performance mode for the renderer is also being looked at to balance out quality and performance when considering the current game Raymarcher. Finally, work continued on the Entity Component Update Scheduler to allow several updates within a scheduling pass. Okay, glad that's over. My favorite part, features. Work continued on the new player inventory expected in 3.15, but some not so great news on that front. There are a lot of hard choices being made on what has to make it into the first release and what can be postponed. Even with some aspects of the inventory coming online later, the new player inventory is shaping up to be a significant improvement to the existing PMA. Just last week on Star Citizen Live, the USPU team came on to let us know that Universal Search will not be included in this first iteration. Overall, I would take this to mean the functionality may not be as fully featured as we might hope. That being said, this feature will develop slowly over future updates to be more in line with what you might expect from a finished game. There will be basic forms of search, but typing in your own search terms sounds like it's still a little ways out. But now that I've rained on you, let's talk about the feature. The key aspect of this new inventory will be physical space and location. No longer will you have access to everything at all times. You will need to store items in cities and ships and on your person. tracking and transferring your belongings as you move through the game. This is why I look at local gameplay reliability for content in the beginning of my update reviews. With this new system, players will have a much more significant reason to stick to one planetary zone. CIG needs to make sure that's a possibility soon. On the technical side, NPCs will be streamed into the game in the position that they were supposed to be in when they got streamed out. This way, whatever confusion happens on the back-end side when the NPC is streamed out will be erased, and the NPC should no longer be spawning back in on top of chairs. The US gameplay team spent part of July working on the new player asset management app. They also continued to work on Ninetales Lockdown, making sure it runs well and is fun to experience. If you'd like to know when this dynamic event or others are happening in the game, subscribe here and I'll let you know. After expanding in June, the Cargo Refactor is receiving TDD work, along with the Character Archetype Editor, which will realistically create NPCs for specific locations in line with virtual and subsumption-based AI. This is another feature that was talked about on Star Citizen Live last week, and sounds like a much bigger feature than we ever thought previously. With NPC creation dynamics already creating upwards of 100 unique NPCs for a landing zone like Area 18, you can imagine how complex this system will get when every planet in every system has its own local clothing styles, culture, and type of people. It's hard to imagine how noticeable this will be in the future of the game, but it could be incredible when it comes to creating diversity in different areas. Finally, along with the 3.14 improvements, the vehicle features team continued developing jump points, sticking close to narrative to make sure the look, feel, and functionality lines up with lore. The graphics and VFX programming team made some improvements to hair rendering and video calls, and made additional preparations for the Gen 12 renderer. They also completed the render-to-texture post-effects pipeline, which will help with bloom, drop shadow, brightness, and other effects on all BRISORS and Lens UIs. Various new features were also added, such as character-attached vector fields, which will allow things such as kicking leaves around as you walk through them. The lighting team worked on the lighting in the Personal Manager app to make it more user-friendly when previewing your style and fashion sense. Work also continued on the upcoming town-like outposts and hospital lighting for Lorville and Grimhex. They also worked on color grading Pyro's planets and moons and worked on the jump point gas cloud in Pyro. While what you are seeing right now is in Stanton, this gives you an idea of the amount of creativity and atmosphere they are pouring into these jump points. These will be substantial locations. We got a quick look at Pyro's last year, but I imagine it will look a bit different when we actually get it in-game. Here also are some bonus shots of work on the third star system, Nyx. This gives you an idea of how things are going with the color grading and height maps almost a year after the initial planet tech was complete. Narrative started off the month getting vendor voice pack recordings for the vendor archetype in the game.
What the hell are you getting? I am done working with you.
There was also a lot of discussion surrounding the upcoming outpost and hospital locations, figuring what NPCs might be encountered there and the feel of branding in the areas. Additional work was done on fleshing out some of the many gangs that inhabit the second system in the game, Pyro. The team also worked with AI content to outline scripts and characters needed for the AI archetypes in development. The props team worked on the utilitarian versions of hospital props for low-tech locations like Grimhex. These props will actually match their high-tech counterparts in functionality. That'll be interesting when insurance costs and docking fees are taken into account for some of the nicer areas versus, well, places like Grimhex. Time was also spent working on Orison's Crusader showroom, in my opinion the absolute best looking display in-game so far. The entrance looks phenomenal, and the inside is looking good too. Expect this to be released no sooner than December. In July, the SST team continued work on the quantum economy and AI simulation system. This further helped develop the understanding and reasoning behind service beacon spawns and fuel and shop price shifts. July saw the UI feature and actor feature teams work closely on the UI screens for the upcoming hospital and medical gameplay. This included creating a 3D display of Skeleton on a UI screen for the first time, which should make the medical experience feel more polished and involved. Work also continued on the improvement of 3D items displayed in holographic UIs, as well as the common controls that will be used for these 3D items that will be used in future screens across the game, such as the new STARMAP. This, I believe, is part of the 3D building blocks work going on that will allow for some very interesting new UI elements that will be needed for dozens of scenarios. The vehicle tech team spent a lot of time fixing bugs and addressing feedback on the new radar scanning and ping feature. I'm happy to hear this. As a fan of exploration gameplay that felt the new feature was a bit spotty, it's good to see they're already putting work towards fixing it. These features also began to see their implementation into first-person gameplay, which will allow you to scan for hidden life forms, both human and otherwise, as well as important items and mission-related info. We've seen a possible concept for the indoor map as well, but don't know what it will finally look like. Finally, support began for showing player-emitted signatures and emissions on the HUD to provide players with more feedback on how much of a presence they have. This will be a welcome step up from the current number-based system. To wrap things up, VFX continued their overhaul of the radar scanning and ping system, which uses a new shader that allows for effects to be played whenever a rapidly expanding globe intersects with a solid body. This will look amazing in gas cloud fleet battles, and will likely be a very crunchy sci-fi moment when we are able to scan inside of a cave. A little bit of work needs to be done to make sure the effect works correctly when the ping angle is changed, but otherwise, the shader has had a great impact on the feature visuals. This month was interestingly a little light on details. And while there is plenty of progress seemingly being made on 3.14, 3.15, and 3.16, the main focus in Star Citizen seems to be preparing for server meshing, quantum, and incorporating Squadron 42 improvements. As we get closer to CitizenCon, this information will continue to be a bit sparse, but I think we'll still get plenty of interesting news in our monthly summaries. Make sure to check out the rest of these monthly summaries in the playlist linked below in the video description, and subscribe to the channel for more Star Citizen content. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and for everybody else here who is watching. I hope you learned something valuable today, and I'll see you later. And thanks to my top supporters TK, Valiant15, The Alpaca, Holston Coop, The Huntress, Dasek, Guilty Conscious, Extreme Tuber 7, El Gordo, Jarzi, Niku, Jin, and Bilal El Yassem.